Welcome to everybody online and face-to-face. My name is Tanya Sermon, and I'm ecstatic to have and be hosting our social impact, the first ever that we've ever hosted, social impact debate for the Ontario election. Although I'm just going to say, this is probably less debate and more conversation, a little more town hall. We will, if we have time, kind of be able to prod around a little bit, but truthfully, it's just an opportunity for us as citizens to be able to learn more about each of the candidates, and it is just an honor and a privilege to have three such remarkable humans who have been willing to stand up and to put themselves on the line to lead, and that is an act of courage and passion and commitment, and so I just want to acknowledge all of that right off the top. I would like very much to welcome you to the Center for Social Innovation. CSI is a nonprofit social enterprise, a community, and a collaborative workspace for people and organizations that are working to make the world a better place. I'm just going to be honest, CSI has been profoundly impacted by COVID. And we're mostly hosting this event to remind you that we exist. We're still going strong, and if you need some workspace, meeting space, or access to other people who want to change the world, we are definitely the place to come. So welcome. If you want a tour of our space, you want to check out what's going on downstairs after the event, we would love to do that for you. This is also our second ever hybrid event. And so what that means is that while we are expecting about 35 people to attend this debate in person, we know that we've got an increasing number of people who are in the online world, and so those are the cameras there, and you can wave and say hello to those folks. How many people have we got logged in so far? 30. Okay, they will come, they do come. First they eat their dinner, they put it on, you know, you've all been there, right? But we're also trying to show off that we can host these kinds of events, that if you're looking for a way to be able to host an event and you're still trying to connect with people from, you know, everybody moved all over the place, now we're connecting with people all over the world, we're a great place to be able to host that, to be able to help you stay connected across the city, across Canada, and around the world. It's also my privilege to acknowledge the land on which we reside. The Center for Social Innovation would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territories of many nations. You've heard probably many of them, and this is always a good exercise for me to practice whether I can pronounce everything correctly. But certainly the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people have all called this region home. And this region is also known as a region around the dish with one spoon. And for me, the dish with one spoon treaty is a ridiculously important treaty because what it really talked about was the power of sharing and respecting the land upon which our lives exist. So I've been working on a way more elaborate land acknowledgement, but I chickened out, and so I'll save it for another time. So just to explain the agenda format really quickly, we did invite candidates from all four parties. Consistently, unfortunately, the Conservatives have chosen not to come. That usually leaves us with a format where mostly these people tend to generally mostly agree. So you got to listen really carefully around the nuance of these questions because it is hard, and that is the reality. So I'm going to attempt to keep time. Each of the candidates will have not more than 2 minutes to respond, and we'll rotate who leads, so that people have a chance to take a stab at it first and they don't get to cheat and listen to each other's questions. Okay. So finally, I'm going to introduce these fantastic humans to you. First, let me introduce Nguyen, who is a lifelong community builder, mom of two, grew up right here in Spadina-Fort York, and has dedicated her career to improving the lives of those who live in these neighborhoods, including during her time as the Director of Social Innovation Canada, which is actually a project of CSI, so we know a thing or two about that, and her work on housing policy, tower renewal at the United Way, Greater Toronto. Now she's raising her family nearby, and you can catch her as she commutes to the office at CSI Spadina in this very building. I'll also just say, this is a passionate advocate for women's issues and an incredible champion of all things life-giving. So it's wonderful to have you here, Chi. Second, I'd like to introduce Cara. I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try. Cara De Grange?
De Grange, yeah.
De Grange, very nice, is a professional with experience in civil service and the nonprofit sector, spending much of her career increasing civic literacy and participation. She currently manages a Canada-wide skills research study supporting education ministries and volunteers her time as a City of Toronto neighborhood climate change champion. Cara holds a bachelor's in Canadian Studies and Political Science from Carleton, master's degree from the University of Alberta, and pursued her PhD studies in Canadian and Quebec politics. She must be geeky. As a parent, she wants to help her community thrive and foster a healthy planet for now and for generations to come. So welcome, Cara.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris, sorry, I did have it written in 14-point font, so thank you, Ella. Chris has served as the MPP for Spadina-Fort York for the past 4 years. And as a former professor, TDSB trustee, and a member of the Toronto Board of Health, Chris has fought for fair funding for our schools and helped the city adopt a public health approach to reducing gun violence. As the MPP, Chris updates have become a trusted source of community news throughout the pandemic. Over the past 2 years, Chris helped start a food program that now feeds 1,500 people per week, helped 5,000 Spadina-Fort York residents register for vaccines, and delivered toys to 500 children during the holiday seasons. Chris has been fighting for affordable housing and end to homelessness, supports for small businesses and workers, and a just transition to a green economy. Apparently, he also acts as the occasional Easter bunny. Don't ask me, but apparently it's true. So, social impact, ladies and gentlemen, really interesting to sort of even have the act of sort of saying, well, what would you put under the umbrella of social impact? But I think we are all facing at this moment in time structural challenges that are facing our provinces that are requiring innovative solutions. And as critical as the economy is, we can't design a sustainable society without careful attention paid to people and planet first. This is certainly the perspective that CSI holds, and it's certainly, I know, one that I suspect will be shared all the way around here. But so I thought I would do is start, and we'll start, Chi, you can begin. And this one should be easy for you. At CSI, we define social innovation as a new idea or approach used to solve an entrenched problem. Ideally, a social innovation is a radical redesign of the underlying systems that are holding this problem in place. So what I mean by that, I just love doing that. What I mean by that is, lots of our policies are treating symptoms, but how are we radically redesigning the systems that are holding us in this problem? So what do you feel is the most pressing issue facing the residents of Spadina-Fort York, and how would you bring a social innovation lens to solving this problem? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Tanya. It's a great question, and thank you. It's so great to be back in this space and back at CSI, and I'm delighted to be camping out here while we run our campaign, so thanks for having us in the building. So I think the most critical issue that we're seeing and hearing at the doors is around affordability, and of course that looks like the challenges around housing. And so the Ontario Liberal Plan, and this is something I'm really proud of because I was part of the team to help develop the housing plan. One of the pillars of it is that we want to create a new agency called the Ontario Home Building Corporation. Now, that corporation is going to act in many ways like a social enterprise, right? Like it is its job, its function, its kind of role in government, and the social innovation aspect of it is that we want to redefine its role and capacity of government to act as a facilitator and a partner. So the role of that corporation, that agency, is to help us unlock the 80,000 acres of surplus lands that the province owns in order to develop 138,000 units of deeply affordable housing. And we want to do that along transit corridors. We also want to make sure that this housing is accessible to first-time buyers, so that's really critical, and a piece of that which I think is really smart. And we also are taking a lens around innovation in terms of mechanisms like street voting. We think it's going to be really important for local communities to help design and think about the density that they think makes the most sense. That innovation work, we have a long history of doing that with the Ontario Liberal team, having started and really incubated the work out of Mars. And I think those kinds of lenses and that work in government is a real opportunity for us to do social impact at scale.
And within 2 minutes, well done, She, modeling excellence. Cara, how about you? Same question.
Yeah, so I know we'll be talking about housing and affordability as well. Mental health is another big issue, but I really wanted to focus on climate change. I think climate change is a big issue in Spadina-Fort York, but across the province, the country, and the world. So we really need to focus on tackling climate change as well. We see in Spadina-Fort York, being a downtown area, we're going to be really heat stressed. You know, we have a lot of buildings. We don't have a lot of reprieve from the heat. When we think of folks who live, you know, in apartment and condos who may not have air conditioning, especially the elderly population, that's going to be a big issue as climate change continues on, right? We're going to see a lot of climate catastrophes downtown, but other places in Ontario as well. And when we think of, you know, the Toronto Islands being in this riding, that's a big issue for them. They're seeing a lot of flooding as well. So we need to think about ways and solutions to combat climate change. And the Green Party of Ontario really wants to have a climate change economy to tackle that. So the way that we want to do that is investing in people and buildings and places to make them more climate resilient. So we want to really invest in students who go back to school, help them fund a part of their education so they can have green jobs, so we can build up the green economy in this province. We also want to protect the places that we care about. So in Spadina-Fort York, Ontario Place is a big issue right now. The Ford government wants to transform that into a private playground and an exclusive spa. I say let's turn it into a park that's free and accessible for folks to have that reprieve from the city heat as climate change becomes a bigger issue. We also want to protect the green belt. We want to actually double that and create a blue belt to protect lakes and rivers as well in this province. Other big issues that we want to tackle when we're talking about climate change is really helping folks make that transition. So we want to make sure that if you want to retrofit your home, you can have a home voucher to make that change and help with the cost associated with that. So, you know, if you want a heat pump, if you want to insulate your home, you can make that change. Electric vehicles is another big part of this strategy for us. We want to make sure that if you want to make the transition, getting off of fuel, which is getting more and more expensive by the day, that you can also make that transition to electric vehicles by having $10,000 for a new vehicle, $1,000 for a used vehicle, electric vehicle, or an e-bike. And we really want to also electrify transit because that is a much cleaner way to get around.
Perfect. That's perfect. 2 minutes too. Chris, these ladies.
Oh boy, I don't know. Okay, I'll try to keep an eye on the clock.
I'm on it. It's all good.
Okay, so thank you. I'm Chris Glover, and I'm running for re-election as the MPP for Spadina-Fort York. And there's a number of issues. Education's my bailiwick. I've been working in education for 30 years, but in a number of different capacities. But I'm actually going to talk about affordable housing because affordable housing is the #1 issue in our riding right now. It's an economic drag on our economy. We need to address this, and in order to address the affordable housing, we need to look at the root causes of where we are. There was, like when you talk about CSI and looking at radical restructurings, there was a radical restructuring of our housing programs in the early 1990s. In 1993, the Federal Liberal Party canceled the National Housing Strategy, and then they introduced legislation to create real estate investment trusts. And now when we're buying homes in Ontario, or renting homes in Ontario, we're not just competing with other people who also want to buy a home, or other people who also want to rent a home. We're now competing with REITs, and these REITs, well, one of them is buying $1 billion worth of housing in Ontario. And I don't know about you, but I can't compete with an organization or corporation that buys $1 billion worth of housing. So we need to get back into building government housing. And the government, under the last NDP government, was building 15,000 affordable housing units per year. And these were co-ops, they were social housing, and they were supportive housing. And we need to get back into doing all three of those things. So the NDP is going to build 250,000 affordable housing units a year. Most of them will be not-for-profit co-ops. There will also be supportive housing to bring an end to homelessness, and these will be with 24/7 care for people with mental health and addiction issues. And the other, I just want to mention, like the roots of this problem, we've had the solution. We didn't have a housing crisis 25, 30 years ago. We had because the government was building housing and creating affordable housing, which put some downward pressure on both the price and the rents. And because the government abandoned those processes, we've got this housing crisis. It's been 25 years in the making. And the creation, the Liberal candidate mentioned, the creation of the Ontario Housing Corporation. That was a great thing. We had one, and it was building Ontario housing, but the Liberal government in 2006 actually closed the Ontario Housing Corporation. So the crisis that we have in affordable housing is largely created by government policy, and we need to change. We need a radical restructuring of government policy so that we bring an end to this crisis in affordable housing.
Beautiful. A little bit over, but I'll just say the Centre for Social Innovation, with our partnership with Social Innovation Canada, just released a really excellent paper around the financialization of housing. And it really speaks to the complexity of the marketplace, the lack of investment in nonprofit and cooperative housing. It speaks to the REITs. It also speaks to the number, 40% of the increased of homes are basically being purchased by the wealthy and then being rented out. And they're using their equity from the first home that they buy to invest in their second home and their third home and their fourth home. So what they call the mom and pop folks are in fact 40% of that problem. So we can definitely call it REITs, and they are about 20% of the problem. But the mom and pop shops and the way that we have been incentivized to save our money, and the fact that our money is, there's nowhere else to invest our savings, is such a complex issue. So anyway, that's just me tooting the horn, but I will say what it does speak to is the question of nonprofit housing, and that relates to the idea of social enterprise. And so just very briefly, social enterprise is, according to me, and there's always debate about this definition, are social purpose, not-for-profits or charities that are undertaking, they're creating social enterprises. So you are sitting in one. The Centre for Social Innovation is a non-profit social enterprise that has a community-based board of directors, and there is nobody taking any equity out of the assets of this particular building. Another reason to come to CSI. So, but we have been working for decades to try to get supports for social enterprise, for nonprofit housing, for community spaces like this, and for so many others. And in 2018, the provincial, and we had been making progress. We had policy stands. We've been working with partners across the country. But in 2018, the provincial government closed the very, very early stage Office of Social Enterprise and removed all of the supports for social finance and social enterprise in this province. CSI was forced to give back $1 million of funding to the province for climate solutions, because this government did not want any money going towards solving climate change. So it's an issue that's close to my heart. I'm pissed as hell. Can you tell us, and I've got you on tape, how you see social enterprises playing a role in your Ontario? And if your party is elected, would you reopen the Office of Social Enterprise? And Cara, I'm just going to give this one to you because I think you're creative and can handle it, but what if Ontario Place became a social enterprise? Just saying. So, would you reopen the Office of Social Enterprise? What would it mean to you? How do you see social enterprise as your party? And which ministry would you attach it to, and why? And I'm starting with you.
So many questions.
I know, sorry. That was my favorite question. I don't know as much about affordable housing, let's be honest.
No, it's a very important question. As someone who worked in the nonprofit sector for the majority of my life, it hits home. Right? We know that the nonprofit sector is suffering. Governments come in, they make cuts. Specifically, conservative governments come in and make cuts at different levels, so it is a big issue. So the Green Party of Ontario actually wants to create a Made in Ontario social enterprise strategy with the nonprofit sector and cooperative sectors as well to drive local job creation. So that's something that that's part of our platform and that we're really excited about. We also have other aspects of the platform that would be super helpful for nonprofits and folks who want to make a difference in this field. So we want to decrease land taxes for companies or what have you that actually give rent subsidies for organizations like nonprofits and social enterprise. So that would also be super helpful for this sector as well. We also want to include a stability fund for nonprofit sectors. So we know that funding can be inconsistent at times, and during the pandemic we saw this, they took a big hit. So we want to make sure that there is funding continuity right there as well. So those are kind of some of the bigger pieces as well. Now addressing the other multitude of questions that you had.
Would you reopen the office?
Oh, I mean, like I said, we would create a Made in Ontario strategy. I'm not sure about an office specifically, but that's something we can definitely look into. And in terms of the ministry, if there was something to the effect, I actually think that social innovation should be part of multiple ministries and not just one. So I wouldn't tie it to one. I say let's increase social enterprise across the board, because I do think that we have to be innovative in healthcare, we have to be innovative in transit, we have to be innovative in all these aspects of life, or else we're not really making that big change. And I think there's also this tendency in government, and I've worked in government before, that we work in silos. We kind of focus on what we're doing right in front of us, and we need to expand that and build connections and bridges, right? So when we're talking about climate change being an issue, it's also related to mental health. It's related to transportation. All these things are interconnected. So let's not just focus on one ministry. Let's expand it across the board and focus on how we can tackle it from different perspectives as well.
Nice. Beautiful, Cara. Thank you. Chris?
Okay, I'll try to stay to 2 minutes this time.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'm enjoying.
Are ya? Okay.
Let's go.
Look, you know, and this is why social enterprise is so important in our province right now, particularly, and not just our province, it's actually important around the world because we are dealing with so many crises. We're dealing with an environmental crisis, we've got a social crisis, you know, we've got a homelessness crisis, we've got an opioid epidemic, and we need the innovation of social enterprises in order to tackle these things. And so the NDP is going to build innovation hubs like CSI in communities across the province. We're going to have a strategic procurement process so that the government, when the government's giving out contracts, they're going to favor enterprises that have a social benefit. And this will pump millions, perhaps billions of dollars into social enterprises across the province. And it will, you know, help it to become a substantial part of our economy. We're going to build and recognize employee ownership trusts at the provincial level and help finance workers to buy their own businesses, the businesses that they've been working in. And the NDP did this in the past. When we were last in government, Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie was going to go bankrupt. And the NDP managed to get the workers to buy it and create a worker co-op. And it not only saved Algoma Steel, it saved the town of Sault Ste. Marie because Sault Ste. Marie, it's a one-industry town, and that steel plant, if it had closed, the town would have died. So the NDP has a record of actually developing innovative solutions in order to address, you know, economic challenges. And let's see, as far as the ministry, I think this one, we need to talk with the social enterprise sector. You know, there should be nothing about us without us. I was thinking, you know, Ministry of Economic Development, but that was, you know, that's too narrow. You know, we need to look at because social enterprises in all different sectors, so how can the government best support social enterprises in all the sectors that they work in? And that's for a discussion with the social enterprise sector.
Nice. Good. And in time.
Yes. Okay.
Chi?
Thanks. This is a great question, and I, have some personal experiences with social enterprise, having run a social enterprise that closed under the Ford government when he came to power. I spent a couple years running Parker P Consulting, which was the social enterprise housed inside White Ribbon Canada. We were trying to take the lessons around community development that we had learned from working with men on ending gender violence and try to bring it to market, and we're quite successful at it. But then, of course, when there was changes in the provincial government, it meant that our boards decided it was too risky to continue on. In terms of what the Ontario Liberal Party is looking to do, and I think we've had an experience and a history of supporting social enterprise and understand so critically the value of the nonprofit sector in supporting our economy and our communities. It is the glue that keeps our communities together. And I think about how important that work has been over the last couple of years, especially during the pandemic. I was part of the team that was handing out some of the emergency community support funds through the United Way Canada, and organizations stepped up and did so much in this time. So that precarity is a really important issue that we need to be paying attention to and we need to respond to. We'd like to invest in what we call the Grow Ontario Fund, and that's going to be about supporting innovators and entrepreneurs to get their businesses off the ground. We've got a $300 million commitment for a loan portfolio that's really focused on women and people of color running small businesses and entrepreneurs. We've got a dedicated $10 million fund for Black entrepreneurs that we think will really support entrepreneurs. As well, this is a measure that will help many social, small, new incorporations coming up. We're eliminating the incorporation fees. We also are interested in this idea of social procurement. It is a really important vehicle. We do spend so much money in our governments. It is an opportunity for us to make sure our money works doubly, and we're excited about that. And we're going to work with Ontario Trailham Foundation to refocus and re-explore what it means to support social enterprises in this province.
Whoa, really?
Yep.
Whoa, that's
It'll be a fun one. And another infrastructure piece that we think will be really useful is a 311 hotline. There are a ton of great programs and services out there for entrepreneurs, and they don't know about it. And so we need to make sure that they're able to access them, to have the supports to really, make their businesses survive and thrive. And we're really, really excited about that package of services and supports that can support entrepreneurs as well as social entrepreneurs.
perfect. I so want to respond to every one of you, but I'm going to be disciplined and not. But afterwards, we should talk about all of those things. So our next question is back to the elephant in the room, the affordable housing question. I think everybody can agree that affordable housing is perhaps the most pressing issue for residents of Ontario and arguably around the world. The Ontario government recently announced its Housing Affordability Task Force report. Recommendations where supply is presented as the solution. I noticed that 2 of your parties identified wanting to increase supply. This is a complexity issue, my friends. Supply is part of the solution. But I do think that we also need to look at some of the other issues. So supply too often looks like sprawl. And it is that sprawl into the green belt, which this province has made very clear that we do not want to do. And in fact, we did have an entire debate on climate change, Cara, so I don't feel too badly.
I watched
but
it.
Yeah, I'm pro-environment, I'm pro-nature. I think it's like pretty much all that really matters. So what is your analysis of this report, high level, and what would your party focus on to ensure an affordable home for every Ontarian? And Chris, we're going to start with you.
Okay. So first of all, I'll say we're going to cancel the 413.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. That's right.
Okay.
I just did that.
It's a $10 billion boondoggle. It's not necessary. They're going to be paving over a vast swath of the green belt, and it goes through sensitive wetlands. It should not be built. It's not the way to build housing in this province. And so that's going to be one of the first things we do. We're also to make housing affordable. I mentioned a number of things in my first question, my first answer, but I also want to say that we're going to support renters as well. We're going to provide supports for 311,000 renters in this province, and we're going to bring in rent control for all units in this province so that nobody's. I've had people call me at my office because this government took rent control off anything built after 2018. So I've had renters call me and say, my landlord's increasing my rent by $500 a month. And so they're having to move. It's just absolutely shameful what's happening out there. We're going to bring an end to rent evictions. You have to regulate the housing market in order to protect renters, and that's one of the things that we're going to be doing. And the other thing, when you're looking at, so let's look at the alternatives. So what kind of development do we want? And I live on Fort York, and I'm right near in the Fort York community, but I'm right near City Place. And I look at City Place as the ideal model. It was negotiated in 1994 by an NDP government and by NDP councillor Dan Leckie and Jack Layton. And what they got the developer to agree to was to set aside 12 acres of green space in the middle of the community. And then they would build condo community and all around. The developer also contributed education development charges to build a Catholic school, a public school, a community center, a childcare center, and a drop-in center. So all of those things were paid for through the development charges of the condos that were built around. And it's an ideal model. That's what we should be looking for. And the challenge has been that with successive governments, both conservative and liberal governments, they haven't been willing to push developers into making those kinds of agreements so that they're not only building a forest of high-rises, they're actually building the communities that people want to live in. So I think City Place is the model for future development.
Good timing.
Thank you. This is another great question. I love them all. They're complex as these challenges are. So on the housing piece, I talked about the Ontario Home Building Corporation and the role that it is going to play as a partner managing and stewarding and really investing in public public housing and social supports. So we identified supportive housing as part of this, social housing in partnership with nonprofits. We also identified 22,000 units of housing that we'd like to work with Indigenous communities to lead, to figure out the approach that is most appropriate for them. And thinking about that sprawl question is really important. You know, we need to think about building the housing where we are already building transit. So that focus on the transit corridors is really critical. We want to take an approach that is focused on gentle density. You know, and that's why we're introducing right-of-way zoning and removing some of the restrictions that make it hard for us to get going on building the kind of housing that we need. So in addition, we also are talking about inclusionary zoning in our platform, as well as a vacancy tax for units, for foreign-owned units, 5% vacancy tax and 2% for domestic. You know, we've got an approach around 250,000 units of housing are already been approved. We want to create a use it or lose it levy. So that means that we need to get the developers actually moving on these projects so that we get the housing built more quickly. And other measures that we're really excited about include parking maximums. Like the idea of parking maximums is that, you know, right now there's minimums and it costs a ton for the developer to include those. We think we can reduce the rates of the units coming to market by about 50 to 100,000 by changing that rule. And lastly, I will say, you know, there's a lot that our three parties all share on the housing piece. We are all committed. We all recognize the depth of this challenge. But I was really proud that, you know, the team from More Neighbors reached out to me on Monday and said, you know, the NDP plan is good. We really are very impressed with how comprehensive the Ontario Liberal plan is. So they're going to come and help me out. I'm really thrilled and delighted.
Yeah, so housing, I agree with you. Let's stop the sprawl. Can't say that enough. Chris and I agree on this. We should cancel the 413. That this is
maybe open up 407 to make it free. Probably deal with any load problems.
So the solution to housing is not creating more highways. I don't know why Doug Ford is obsessed with highways. It seems to be the only thing he talks about all the time now. Highways, highways, highways. But that's not the solution. Creating communities where you live and work and play in the same space, that's the solution. You don't want to have to drive far after a long day's work and spend time away from your family. You want to be able to get home within 15 minutes or so. That's the green vision in Ontario. So the way that we want to do that is to look at zoning. We really need to work with communities to look at zoning and create more spaces for duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and create other solutions to gentle density. That's how we would see it. So the fact that we can't build those alternate solutions is very frustrating. So this is a solution to create more population within a certain specific area. Infill housing is another one. So if you're taking down a building, build something else up. And make sure that we use those spaces instead of going out and killing the green belt. When we're looking at making housing more affordable for folks as well, so that's the question of creating more spaces. Well, we also want to create more housing as well. So we have 1.5 million homes that we want to develop, and we also want to create affordable homes. So we have a plan for 160,000 affordable homes and 60,000 with wraparound mental health services for folks who need it. So that's a big issue, and especially in Spadina-Fort York, we see that there is a homelessness problem, so we want to create more spaces for that as well. For you and me, other aspects of housing that are important is making sure that we end blind bidding.
Which?
End blind bidding for when, yeah, so it's a really big issue. Like, you have no idea what the competition is for a house, and the house prices are so high right now, and you don't know if someone's actually bidding the prices they are. So we need to remove that as part of the process for applying for a house. We also need to make sure that when you do want to buy a house, the home inspection is mandatory and would be paid for by the person who is selling their home, so that you actually know what you're getting yourself into, and when you move in, you're not surprised that you have to pay thousands of dollars on renovations because something went wrong with the house. So that's another big part of our plan as well, making sure that we do that.
I think that's your two.
Okay. I mean, I had other stuff, but we'll talk later.
I actually would like to just, I actually going to take a moment because this is such an important issue, and to see if any of you had a question for one of the other candidates. I'm throwing it in there, sorry. Sometimes you gotta just live on the edge. But like, you know, and I'll just, as you're thinking about it, I'm gonna ask a little impromptu one. Like, I've been, first of all, when we went to build CSI Annex, we were told by the city that we could not develop the building unless we created 10 parking spaces for an existing 100-year-old building. like crazy requirements around parking. So just throw that into the mix a little bit. But I'm actually devastated to hear that the whole community benefits agreements that we have been using in the relationship between the city and the province over the last, I don't know how many years, are basically, what is the legislation called that the Conservatives are putting forward? They're basically taking away all of our community benefits. I was talking to Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam the other day, and she said, as a councillor, the community benefits that had been available through Section 37 and other council and city powers are going to be diminished down to not more than about 15% of what had been previously available. And what was that? What is that? It's the somebody help me here. Who's a policy geek?
The MZOs, I'm sure.
No, it's not transportation. It's the planning department. It's basically the planning act that they're changing.
It's a revision to the Planning Act. I don't remember the particular name of that bill, but yeah, they basically stripped Section 37 money, which went to all kinds of community benefits like parks and daycare centers and playground equipment. Like all of that has been stripped away. Almost all of it has been stripped away.
Yeah. So if you want to get out there and protest something really immediate, it happens. It's literally happening. All the changes happen in September. Anyway, do you have a question for each other? That was me buying you time. Questions for each other? About housing, just about this, and about your policies. I'm really curious to hear differences.
Yeah. So can I ask?
Yeah.
So Cara, my question is, so you said 50,000 supportive housing units, and that's 60,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did the number come from?
The policy team that worked on the platform looked at that. I'm not sure where did your number come from.
From the Canadian Mental Health Association.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And what's your number, Chris?
30,000.
30,000.
Yeah, but we'll look at the numbers and we'll see. The big thing is that we need to bring an end to homelessness. And people that are chronically homeless, 40% of them have either mental illness or addictions or intellectual disabilities. And this is a crime. This is an absolute shame in our society, and we need to address that. So whatever number needs to be built, we need to build it.
Sure, I agree. We do need to build it, and 30,000 is great. 60,000, leaving room for if we see more need, especially after the pandemic. Maybe there is more need. I don't know. I would imagine that folks have had a harder time, working during the pandemic, or might have mental health issues that have emerged more so after the fact. So I think it's good to have a buffer if we need it. But
CSI is an amazing home for mental health when you need to escape your children. Just saying. Yeah, sorry, carry on. Do you have a question, Cara, for one of the other candidates?
Not at this time
okay.
right now.
Chi, anything?
No, I'm good.
No? Okay, good. Well, then I just thought I'd throw it in there. Next favorite topic, basic income. So in 2016, the former government implemented the Basic Income Pilot Project in Thunder Bay, Hamilton, and Lindsay. And I'm not going to get the details right, but it was essentially that a single person would be provided with a basic income of $17,000. And they saw amazing, in previous studies in the 60s, they'd seen some amazing implementation of that. The current government closed down the program in 2019 with just one foul swoop. So it's been something that we've been bantering around and hearing a lot about and kind of experimenting with in the form of a CERB over the last 2 years. So Chi, we'll start with you. Would your party restart this pilot? And how would you approach the proposal to create a basic income for all? And how would you see paying for it?
Thanks, that's a great question, and I'm very proud that the previous Liberal government had put that program and the pilot into...
Just a little late. Could have been done 3 years earlier. Just saying. Sorry.
Yeah, and and of course the decision from the Doug Ford government to callously cancel that program in the middle of the pilot while we were doing the research is absolutely maddening. When I think about the reasons why we need a universal basic income, and it's really clear some of the proof points over the last few years, and working here at CSI and seeing how many innovators are really living with some precarity, right? And so, you and I chatted a little bit about this, but the idea of, if we are doing the pilot again, how do we make sure that we have a focus on the potential that we can unlock with artists, with social entrepreneurs, with innovators? I think about the work that we did when I was at Mass LBP to support a program called City Idol. The idea was that, there are all kinds of innovators doing incredible things, but if they have to worry about making sure there's a secure roof over their head, how do we unlock that capacity and that talent? So it's something that I think is really critical. And as part of like the conversation about where we want to be going post-COVID, we're also going to do a pilot around a 4-day work week. We think there's amazing things to learn if we experiment with these things, and now is the time when we are learning to be more flexible in all of the parts of our lives to explore and understand the implications and how we can do this better. So I'm very excited that we'll bring back the pilot, and we think it's absolutely critical to figuring out how to scale it.
Great, beautiful. How about for you, Karen?
Yeah, so the Green Party actually does support universal basic income. We're not talking about a pilot, we're talking about this as part of our platform and something that we believe in. And in terms of, we did see a lot of benefits from the pilot, and that's kind of the reason why we want to do it. So when folks aren't concerned about where the money's coming in, if they're struggling to make ends meet, they want to invest back in their communities. They go back to school, they go and learn something, and then they come back and they work in a new field or what have you. So that's really important. Or they open up a business. So those opportunities only exist if they feel supported in that venture. So we would do universal basic income. The way we would look at it is also by region. So we know that in Toronto, the cost of living is much higher than other places in the city, or in the province. So we want to make sure that, that would be reflected in the rate that you would get, let's say that you live in Toronto versus somewhere else in the province. And how we would pay for it is that we would look at other social benefits that are existing right now. We would streamline the system to make it more efficient, so folks aren't running around from one agency to another applying for something, so that there is actually only one application portal for this kind of work. That way we would streamline the system, save costs there, and use that funding that's allocated for other programs and invest that back into the universal basic income plan that we would propose.
Great, beautiful. I think if the Greens got in, it would be a radically different world. I'm so interested. Sometimes the curiosity just, but it's your turn. Chris, what do you got? What do you got on basic income?
Let's see. So we're going to restart the basic income pilot, and we're going to create a task force of people with lived experience of deep poverty to direct that pilot and to also direct the end to serious poverty in this province. And when you look at, again, we need to look at where this came from. So in 1995, the Conservatives at that time cut our OW and ODSP by 21%. No one else in the province, except the poorest people in the province, lost a fifth of their income in that year. It was absolutely shameful. And so this cancellation of the pilot was also really shameful. But in the meantime, our ODSP and OW rates have steadily declined relative to inflation. So the Conservative and Liberal governments let them decline. The current OW rate is $733 a month. It's not enough even to rent a room. So when you look at, the last 25 years of Conservative and Liberal governments, we've got people not living in poverty, we've got people living in destitution. And this is part of the reason that we have a homelessness crisis, and we've seen through the early studies of the pilot on the basic income that it can make transformational change for people's lives. And, mentioned at the beginning that, I'm helped feed 1,500 people with this program. Every Sunday for the last 2 years, I've been delivering meals to people, to seniors and people experiencing homelessness. One of those people, Michael, and I asked his permission, I'm allowed to use his name, we got housing for him through Seeds of Hope 4 months ago. And he is rebuilding his life. And he is now going to be volunteering in my campaign. And after the campaign, I'm hoping to give him a work reference, and so he can rebuild his life. And we can see, if we give people an opportunity, they can rebuild their lives and become more integrated into the economy. And I know I'm out of time, but let me just...
You're good, go ahead.
I'm good?
Yeah,
okay.
You're okay, you got 45 seconds.
The final question was, how do we pay for it? And I'm going to challenge your question, if that's all right, Tanya.
Yeah.
I think it's the wrong question.
Yeah.
I think we should be asking the question, the question shouldn't be how do we pay for it? It's an investment. Even the IMF says that for every dollar that we invest in social services, we get $1.50 back. When you have somebody like Michael coming off the streets and into housing and and not being dependent upon all the services that he was dependent upon, as a person who was experiencing homelessness, it actually saves us money. And if he's able to hold a job, he will be contributing taxes to our society. So it's not a cost, it's an investment.
I love that. I love that, and I love being corrected on such wonderful topics. So, I've got another question that is not on the list, but you raised it, and I'm really interested. I don't know if you guys know, and maybe you can clarify, but ODSP, and all of the kind of social assistance programs, you're saying 700, and how much comes in every month? 733. And one of the policies that I have run up against year after year after year in my work working with marginalized employment social enterprises has been the inability for somebody who is on Ontario Works or some sort of ODSP to retain any of their income before it is clawed back from them. And it is the most significant way that you ensure that the poor remain poor and get poorer. What, I know you didn't prepare for this, and if you don't feel comfortable, please just pass on it, but would you do something about this, please? Somebody?
Yes. The Green Party actually wants to do something about that. Well, first off, we would also double DSP as well. So we want to make sure, like Chris was mentioning, you can't live off of that. So we're actually the party that's promoting the most, so we would double, as opposed to the other parties who I think are doing 20%. So if your number is already low and you're only doing 20%, that doesn't help as much as it should. And in terms of clawing back, if you make an income, you shouldn't be penalized if you're trying to make ends meet and by having your income clawed back. So no, we would definitely look at that and definitely change the system that as it is now.
Do you have anything concrete? Anybody? Like something? Go ahead, Jean.
Well, I don't want to misspeak. I'm pretty sure it's in the plan. I think we're going to raise the amount that you can earn. I think it's $6,000 a year. So I think that's a bump up from $2,400. I hope I don't get that wrong. There's a lot of numbers in the plan.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's like
fair
82
enough.
pages long, but
yeah, and I really did pop this on you, so my apologies.
And and when we're thinking about the whole package, one of the measures that we're putting forward that I'm really excited about, which I actually think is really game changing, is dropping the price of transit to $1 a ride. And $40 a month for a Metro Pass. So, like, I think, the basket of benefits and the savings that we are trying to identify for a host of Ontarians, I'm very proud of because I think it will help. And, I hear you on the ODSP. As someone who's worked in the social service sector, I know that it's really critical that we continue, and I will continue to advocate inside my party to push us there. But,
Nice. Chris, you want to comment?
Okay, yeah. So as soon as we form government, or if it's a minority government, the first thing we're going to push for is an immediate 20% increase on ODSP and OW. This is only a start. Then we're going to form a task force of people with lived experience on OW and ODSP to develop a plan to bring an end to this kind of poverty in our province. And that's going to be part of the basic income plan as well. So we can't just do it. And this is one of the values of for me, delivering meals to people experiencing homelessness over the last 2 years. I'm not, developing policy based on briefing notes. I'm developing policy based on understanding and knowing people who have experienced homelessness and being able to speak with them. And we also had a homelessness work group that I've been hosting for the last couple of years. The research that we did at that homelessness work group and the affordable housing work group, that actually fed into the NDP platform. Nice. So we're already doing the work, we're already communicating with the community about how to bring an end to this kind of poverty.
Thank you. Thank you for going and being able to walk with me down an unscripted question. For me, it's one of the most inane policies that I think that this province has. And you want to talk about investment, you're basically making it impossible to make an investment unless you change that clawback rule. So anyway, you heard my passion for it. So we'll on to the next topic. So, I mentioned the land acknowledgement at the beginning, and I've been working on my own learning around reconciliation. Oh, sorry, thank you, Coach. My own learning around reconciliation, and am in shock and shame at our history, and also kind of sometimes a bit inspired about what we might be able to learn with the invitation to reconciliation. I think that there's an opportunity for Ontario and for Canada to be able to learn from our Indigenous people and to really embody that knowledge and that wisdom in our policies. That is not my question, that's my rant. What is the role of the provincial government in working toward reconciliation? What steps has your party taken? How would your party continue those efforts if elected and hold those elected accountable for our pathway towards reconciliation? And I forget who goes first. Is it you, Chris? I think, yeah, or is it you? Why don't we go with you, Chris? I think, yeah, I forget. Sorry, I lost it. But tell us what you're thinking with the NDP.
Okay, so in the NDP caucus, Ontario caucus, we're fortunate to have 3 Indigenous members, Saul Mamakwa, Suze Morrison, and Guy Nguyen. And Saul Mamakwa is the first MPP elected in Canada who has experience of residential schools. And he's from a northern community. And the thing that his voice has brought to the legislature, he's brought the daily impact of our mistreatment of First Nations people, not just historically, not just through the residential school system, but today. All the time, he's getting up in the legislature, he's talking about the lack of clean drinking water, which is a national shame in this province. It's absolutely shameful. And I will state, it is an exercise in government racism, because it's not just the remote northern communities. Curve Lake Reserve near Peterborough is the only community near Peterborough that does not have access to clean drinking water. It's absolutely shameful. We've got to bring clean drinking water. And then there's a housing crisis. Saul was talking about communities in the north where it gets down to -40 in the winter, and there are multiple families sleeping in tents because there's not adequate housing. There's mold in the housing. People have sores on their bodies because of housing. And the most frustrating thing I will say over the last 4 years, when Saul got up at the very beginning of this term, of the last term of government, he asked the government, what will you do about clean drinking water? When will we have clean drinking water in all our communities in Ontario? And the government's response was, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically it's not really our jurisdiction, but we'll write a letter to the federal government. And this has been the attitude of the provincial government for 25 years. There's no reason over the last 25 years, through Conservative and Liberal governments, that we have not brought clean drinking water to every community in the Indigenous communities of this province. And then, I don't want to go too long in the time, but this is something. I was in Sault Ste. Marie just before the pandemic, because I was the colleges and universities critic, and I was touring Algoma University, and Mike Manta, who's the MPP up there, he rousted me out of bed at like 7 in the morning. He said, come on, I want to show you something. So we went to the site of the residential school. And there, at the back of the school site, there's a bunch of headstones and one side of the graveyard, and at the back there's nothing. And he said, the headstones, this is where the staff were buried, and the back is where the children were buried. And I think about the pain and the trauma that our First Nations people have been through, and are still going through. Reconciliation isn't enough. We need to make amends, and we need to, provide people, the First Nations people, with whatever they ask for in order to heal from the devastation that we've imposed upon them. So I'll leave it there, but we have so much to do in terms of reconciliation.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We'll go to Chi and then you, Karen.
Thanks. Thanks, Tanya. And, I agree with Chris. There's huge work to be done in this space. I think about the conversations I had to have with my son, who's 7, when we discovered what had happened, the first round of the graves, and the kind of shock we all felt back in, I guess, basically this time last year, last June. It hasn't been that long, but I feel like we have not maintained the conversation about what we need to be doing here. The work to really do the relationship repair is crucial, and we need to do it in a way that is respectful and is about our learning as settlers. And under the previous Liberal government, we had $250 million that we'd started to invest in building out an Indigenous-focused strategy. And, we saw all kinds of cuts and changes under the Doug Ford government, and we want to make sure that every Canadian, every Ontarian is on the path to learning about the experience around residential schools. We want to bring back the curriculum and kind of reinforce the learnings that's critical there, as well as ensuring that folks have access to learning Indigenous languages. We'd like to commit $2 million to building out Indigenous libraries. Currently, there's only 30% on reserve. We think that's really critical. And we are investing $5 million in an Indigenous cultural fund, which we had previously. We're also like to support $25 million into 2 Indigenous businesses because we know that there's a ton of innovation and resilience and lots of great opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs to do incredible things in our economy and our society. I think it's really important to remember that we also need to be working from a framework of, always in consultation, always with Indigenous folks leading, because it's about their futures and their sustainability. We have work to do on implementing Jordan's principles, and we want to bring back a Minister of Reconciliation. So all of this work would fall under that minister, so that we could really make sure there's accountability there on the part of our government. And lastly, last point, September 30th, we want it to be a stat holiday. I think it's really important to take that time as a collective province to do the work together.
We agree with that point. So yes, the Green Party of Ontario is also committed to put the implementation of the TRC recommendations. I agree with Chris. We need to do something about the water boiler advisories. It's unacceptable that we have this today in this day and age. This is ridiculous. The Green Party is really committed to making that change right away. If we have to pay the bill right now and send it to the federal government, we will do that. We need to get it sorted quickly. In terms of other policies that would be very important for Indigenous people, we want to make sure that there's broadband and connectivity across the province for Indigenous communities as well, so they can actually participate in education, in the economy, in different ways like that as well. This would be a super useful tool for them. We want to make sure that we respect the places that matter to Indigenous communities by protecting the lands and making sure that we're not building on them and just really making sure that we protect those spaces. And I also wanted to touch base on, I mentioned that we want to turn Ontario Place into a provincial park here in Spadina-Fort York. We actually worked with the Indigenous community in creating that policy that we have. So we worked with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and they were on board. So we consulted them in that process. That's just an indication of how we work with communities across the province. We also have a plan for Indigenous housing as well. We want to create 22,000 Indigenous owned and operated permanent homes. So that's something that would make a big difference as well. And we want to look back at the services that we provide Indigenous communities and make sure that they can actually access those in the languages that matter to them. So it's one thing when you try to go get healthcare, but if you don't understand what you're communicating back and forth, that's very complicated. So we want to make sure that we can have translation and interpreters to help in those communities, and that we focus on building language services in French and also in Indigenous languages as well.
Nice, wonderful. I'm just going to take a moment to recognize that it's getting warm up here. So learning for our team that we need fans or something. I'm just saying, if you look at us sweating, it's not that we're nervous, it's we're actually sweating. And also just to take a moment to suggest that we're coming to a wrap-up of some of the formal questions, and there's an opportunity if you'd like to write down, and I've got Danielle, the beautiful Danielle over there, who's maybe has a couple questions from our online audience, but we'll keep going. But if you have a question and you want to write it down, I won't be able to take all the questions, but if you do, write it in a really big font. That's all. I don't really handle anything less than 14 anymore, so... Okay, so my next question is actually about how disempowered so many of us feel. So only one party, damn it, will be elected because you're all excellent, and I think it would be just a pleasure to have you all working together in ways of service in service to our riding and to the province, and it breaks my heart the way democracy works. But anyway, moving on, one more party, only one party will be elected. And all of you are from downtown Toronto, the heart of this city. Ooh, my favorite place to be. Many of us feel extremely disempowered by how little our voice means in matters in this election. This question, for example, of how can people in downtown Toronto change the tide around Highway 413? How do we get our perspectives on climate change outside of the downtown core? Who are we to say anything about the damn green belt? Thank you very much. And it breaks my heart, and it feels sometimes that that's one of the reasons why we don't have the democratic engagement that we might want to see. However, there's lots of different ways of working in government and in our democratic process. So if you are elected, but do not form government. What will you do to advocate for social issues or any issues from the riding of Spadina-Fort York? And how will you bring our voices to Queen's Park? And I think he's starting.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm running to form the government. I'm very proud of the Ontario Liberal plan and the Ontario Liberal team. You know, we are running 90% new candidates stepping into politics because all of us care deeply. I mean, all three of us care deeply, right? We're doing this in service of our country and our province. So, you know, but that's the work, right? 90% of us are new candidates, doctors, nurses, bank executives, nonprofit experts. We are stepping in because we want to make sure that we have competent, good leadership to hold to take us through to the next chapter. But if we don't form government, you know, think about like the ways in which we can create more accountability in community. I think it's been really interesting, you know, when the community benefits piece, we almost lost a few weeks ago in early March. The Ford government was like, well, we'll just disappear the commitment to 10% targets. You know, it was the advocacy of the sector, but as well as the Ontario Liberal team that pushed back and said, no. This is really critically important. We need to make sure that we hold on to this. Same with the changes around the traditional Chinese medicine school. You know, we are grateful for the leadership of Sue Wong and Stephen Del Duca for stepping up to say, like, this is a change that we cannot accept. And, you know, Ford back down. You know, and generally and on the advocacy piece, I think it's really important. We've heard loud and clear that one of the mechanisms that exists in government that is being misused and abused by our provincial government is the ministerial zoning orders. Ford's used it 60 times over the last few years. So we are committing to scrap the ministerial zoning orders and putting a new rules-based measure that respects what community wants and what communities have said is important. So it's not going to override environmental challenges. It's not going to override community wishes. We want to work in partnership. We want to come in and be a collaborative, good partner to our municipal colleagues, because that's how we get good things built. I almost swore. I will hold my tongue. Thanks.
Yeah, so we actually have the luxury in Spadina-Fort York of having very progressive folks living here, right? So I understand the frustration if you want to have a progressive government in office and you're seeing all of what's happening with the Conservative Party and how they're taking a lot of the seats. It must be frustrating. Your voice isn't necessarily in government. The luxury of having a lot of progressive folks in this riding is that you can actually vote for any one of us and you won't split the vote because the Conservative numbers are so low that it's not a non-issue in this riding. So if Greens, one of the reasons I'm running for the Green Party is that we can actually be an independent voice for you. So unlike other political parties in the system, we can actually represent the riding specifically because we don't have to vote along party lines every time. So what that means is that if you vote for me, and let's say that there's a policy for whatever reason that I wouldn't agree with, or we wouldn't agree with the Green Party, or whatever, you know, we may have a different stance on a specific issue, I can actually vote for whatever makes sense for our riding. These folks can't necessarily do that, or they may be kicked out of the party. So that's a big difference. So I can actually be a strong, independent voice for you in Spadina-Fort York. Another aspect that I wanted to talk about was that the Greens actually work a lot with other parties. We have to. We don't form government. So we're all about cooperation. Personally, you know, I haven't been elected as an MPP before, but I do work in consensus building in government capacities. So I work with ministers of education across the province from any political stripe. So I have to bring people together and make them reach consensus on issues. So I'm a consensus builder, and that's something that I would bring forward if I would be elected your MPP. The other thing that's an important one that I'm going to bring up for this election is we might actually hold the balance of power. The Green Party might actually hold the balance of power. We're actually going to have, there's a good chance that we're actually going to get more seats this election. So it's an interesting place to be in. If we want someone to put pressure on government and they're just missing they're a few seats shy, they might actually have to cooperate with the Green Party in order to get some things passed. And we can put pressure on folks to make sure that we actually have what we want in Spadina-Fort York represented there, and the green policies that would be very beneficial to Ontarians now and for generations to come.
That'd be fun to watch.
I think so too. You just need to vote for us.
Chris, what do you got?
Okay, so you're when I was running 4 years ago in my nomination meeting, I said that I didn't want to go to Queen's Park alone. I wanted to go with the community. And so that's what I've been doing. For the last 4 years, I've hosted a number of work groups. It includes the Special Education Disability Advocacy Group. And most recently, we worked on changing recommendations to the government on changing our healthcare system to make it AODA disability accessible. I've got a small business work group. I've got a gun violence work group that includes people who have lost their children to gun violence and also former gang members. And before I became an MPP, I was on the Toronto Board of Health. And this group together, we brought a public health approach to the City of Toronto, which begins by addressing gun violence, by addressing its root cause, which is poverty. I've got affordable housing, I mentioned before, I've got an affordable housing town hall, and that is the one that did a lot of the research and developed a lot of the planks in the NDP's housing platform. I've got a tech committee, and because I've been the tech and innovation critic, and we developed plans for expanding broadband across the province. And we did it through, what we advocated for is doing it through small local enterprises, including co-ops, to deliver that broadband to the last mile in our communities. When the demolition crews rolled into the foundry, I worked with there were 18 residents associations in our riding. I worked with the 18 residents associations, and we formed the Federation of South Toronto Residents Associations, and we're partnered with the sister organization, which is in North Toronto, and we're partnered with another organization, which is across the Golden Horseshoe, and so that we would be speaking as communities with one voice, and we would be able to address things like MZOs that have been imposed upon us and actually give communities a real voice in the planning decisions for our communities. So I've been doing this work already. Oh, the final thing I will say about the FOSTRA, once it was formed and was underway, I stepped back so that it could function as an independent, nonpartisan organization, because I really believe that there should be a separation. You know, I'm happy to help in any way I can, but we also need strong community voices that be advocating for ourselves at the planning tables. So those are some of the things that I've been doing to bring the community voice to Queen's Park. The final thing I will just mention is I've been fighting education cuts for 20 years, okay? And by organizing our community and the NDP organizing communities across Toronto and across the province, we were able to stem the tide and stop some of the cuts that the Conservatives had made. And before that, I've been doing it I got started with the Mike Harris government, fighting education cuts, and then with the Nguyen, McGuinty, Nguyen, Del Duca government, I was fighting education cuts. So we did that. We've been able to stop some of those cuts and fight for our schools by organizing communities.
I'm just thinking that you and I have been at it for a while, Chris. I remember the Harris government era, and I even remember the Bob Rae era back then. So anyway, anybody remember who Bob Rae was? Okay, good. Just checking. There you go. Okay, this is the craziest question. I'm just rereading it, and I'm like, this is so open-ended. There's no way they can answer this. So I'm going to read you what I wrote, but then I'm going to make it a little easier, I think, because I'm asking them to analyze the entire economic system of our planet. You know, I figured that was a good way to end, you know? So it's a bit big, but it's something that we at the Center for Social Innovation believe profoundly in. So it's clear that our economic system is failing many as we face insane housing prices, rising costs everywhere, insecure supply chains, no strategy to ensure import substitution, and a constant and sustained exploitation of people and planet. At a time when expectations on our government are growing, deficits are growing, and there's this tension because our expectations on government are outstripping our ability to balance the books. Now, we've heard your case for this is an investment, so you've made that point. I'm going to go deeper with you here. You know, at the Center for Social Innovation, we believe that we need the next economy. We need design principles for how to craft an economic system that will pull us out of this incrementalist atrocity where we are simply continuing to have the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and all of that growth taken out of our soil, our land, our trees, our water, and our livelihoods. It infuriates me Sorry, I'm going on a rant, sorry. But it does, it infuriates me that we're just playing around the goddamn edges of this issue. And yet, nobody here has talked to me, and I don't see anything on shareholder ownership or the circular economy or donut economics. I think we need a radical rethink, a really radical rethink. What do you think? And what would your one defining characteristic of what an economic system that you think would be better for this planet, for our province? Just talk to me. Anybody can start, because this one's a doozy. Do you want to go, Cara?
Sure.
Yeah. I know the Greens are like juicy on this stuff. Let's go.
I mean, we've talked about this. I've mentioned it a bit earlier. We were talking about the climate economy. So we see really, the Green Party wants to put people before politics. We want to put science at the forefront of how we're making decisions, making sure that we're making policy decisions based off of, smart decision making and research. That's how we make decisions. So in terms of the climate economy, we want to make sure that we protect the places that matter to us, for us now, so we can enjoy them now, but also for the generations to come. So the reason I'm actually running for office is I have an 8-month-old baby at home. Thank you.
Courageous, crazy woman.
Yes, this is an undertaking for sure. Yeah. But it's so important, and that's the thing, right? When I look at her and I see my nephews and the next generation, it makes me so afraid to think of what's going to happen to them if we don't do something now. It's now or never, right? So when you're voting this election, it's really about what you want for your future generation, your kids, your grandchildren, and help them have a future. And I think that we're talking about the economic system. We talked about, how the Greens support universal basic income. These folks want to have a pilot. I say, let's go for it, right? We talked about how we want to invest in protecting our planet. We want to double the green belt. That's not nothing. We want to invest in making sure that folks have access to education so that they can learn these skills to be a climate leader in the world. Ontario has the population to do this. We have the technology to do this. Why not invest in making that change now? Right?
Great. No, it's perfect. Good.
Thank you.
What do you got, Chris?
Okay, so I'm gonna step back for a second here. And
I don't think you can go higher than I just did, but carry on. What do you think about our economic system, Chris?
I think our economic system's not working.
Yeah.
It's broken. It's really broken. It's broken. We're not developing a healthy society. We're not developing a healthy economy. We're not going to be leaving the next generation, with a livable planet if we don't change course right away. And I think it's wonderful you've got an 8-month-old. My daughter I got started in this when my kids were in elementary school and I was fighting my Caris's education cuts. My daughter just had a baby, and so I know.
Congratulations
I
to
am
you.
one of those totally annoying grandparents, so after this, I will show you some pictures.
Yes, of course. I like that.
Yes, okay. But having, Shay being born now, it pushes your time horizon further into the future. And God willing, he will turn 80 just after the turn of the next century. And when you look at the environmental prognosis for that period, if we don't start making changes right away, the future is not going to be good for the next generation.
Give me an example of one. Give me one that you would do that would be like macro. If you had all the power, you win, what would you do to show off as the NDP?
So, first of all, there's so many things.
Give me one.
First of all, our power system. We got to transform our power system from a fossil fuel economy to a green economy. And the benefit of it, the value of it is that solar is now cheaper. It's the cheapest form of electricity going. Mm-hmm. The NDP government in Alberta, Rachel Notley, she signed a contract for 6 cents an hour, 6 cents a kilowatt hour solar energy for Alberta. Mm-hmm. We should be transforming the energy system in our economy. And can I go back to?
Go ahead.
So. You look at, it's not just the environment though, it's also our society. And you look at, over the last 40 years, our GDP has gone up by 50%. So there's 50% more wealth in this province than there was 40 years ago. But all of that wealth has gone to the top 10%. The median income over the last 40 years has been flat. So this means that 50% of people have less money now, make less money now than they would have 40 years ago. And when you add to the costs that have been downloaded onto all of us, the cost of housing, student debt, this is why we have an affordability crisis. So we need to invest, and we need to change our economic system in order to create a healthy society and leave the next generation both with a healthy society and a livable planet.
Beautiful. Took it on. How about you, Chi? You willing to go crazy with me here?
Listen, I think we all agree that we want, coming out of the pandemic, that we do want a kinder, gentler society. We want to be making sure that we have programs and supports in place. And I think it's really critical that government is at the forefront of it, right? Like, there are many partners in this work, but I do believe in heavily investing in social programs because I think there is a huge return for our communities. When we do the public investment on housing, every dollar we put in goes back $1.40 into the economy. You know, when we came out of World War II, what did we do? We built cars, we built houses. What do we need to do to come out of the pandemic? We need to build houses, we need to build transportation. The ways in which we move our society, move our communities, needs to really radically alter. And I know that the Ontario Liberal team is talking some big, bold ideas, costed, clear directions, and with lots of balance so that we get this right. You know, some of the things that I think are important to think about is that progressive taxation does work. That's why we want to do a 1% tax on corporations who are making $1 billion a year. It's going to help us fund a measure that we think is going to help lots of people in terms of pocketbook issues, but prepared foods, $20, not going to pay HST. That's the mechanism we want to use to fund it. We also want to create a 2% higher tax level on individuals making $500,000 a year. That's only 0.2% of Ontarians, but that's going to generate some new revenue for us that I think is really critical. You know, in thinking about the shifts that we need, I've been advocating for childcare and feminist issues for the last 30 years. I cannot believe it's taken this long to get a childcare deal in place. You know, we could have had one about a decade ago. We didn't, you know, so here we are in 2022. Finally, and we are the last province to get this deal. I am thrilled that the Ontario Liberal government has promised to refund those back to January 1st, those families who have been paying additional funds to $27.50 per child. I think it's a great measure, as well as creating $10 a day before and after care. You know, we need to do the structural changes to make the economy work for people, and we need to make sure that we are doing the experiments that are really going to deliver for us. So that's why UBI is really important. That's why the 4-day work week is really important. And that's why we're also introducing a portable benefits program. You know, we know that we can do these at scale. We'll do that in consultation with community to get these right.
Beautiful. Thank you. It was amazing. That was a good list. You had a good list. And I was like, I was just thinking about circles. So, which is to say, and this is just me tooting my own horn for a jiffy again, you know, I've been thinking about the economic system. I've been thinking about how it holds people back, and I've been thinking about how it shoves people out. And I've been thinking about, I did a little work around studying the circular economy. And, you know, mostly we think about the circular economy as one of waste. You know, how do we upscale or up-level, or what's that called, upcycle old clothing, the whole vintage fashion world, the opportunity to create enterprises and small businesses, big businesses, around taking advantage of the circular economy. But in my own thinking, I've been really diving into the concept of circularism. So I offer this to you as a gift. Everything you need to know about the answers you learned before you went to school. Right? Before you were indoctrinated into everything else, you learned your shapes. And the shape of the circle is a far departure than the triangle, which is what we've been trying to manifest in this form of capitalism for 100 years. So I really, really invite people to think. It's deep, I know. People think I'm a flake. It's fine. I'm okay with that. But truly, it's about inclusion. It's about equity. It's about making sure that there is no such thing as waste. You know, the concept of waste didn't even exist 150 years ago. There was no such thing as waste. We used it. It was a material that got reused into another product. And it's the same way about humans. Everybody should have a role. Everybody should be able to contribute. Okay, that's me. I'm pontificating. Hey, Danielle, yo, over there, sister, how is the online world going? Online can't hear you. Tell us how many people we got? What's going on over there?
Hello.
Oh, look at you, Madonna.
I know, eh? So we have over 30 people online right now. Everyone says hello.
Hello.
We do have a couple questions. They have been pretty much much answered by the candidates. I can go over them quickly. Have you considered the impacts of your policies on housing affordability?
And we covered that
Kind of been
quite a bit,
answered.
Yeah.
Regarding universal basic income, would this be based off of a pre-existing model or would it be revamped? We touched that.
That's why we have pilots, is to try to figure that out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anything else? How about questions? Anything else over there? No? I've
None-
got a
nothing
doozy
else
of a
from me.
closer, but I'm just waiting to see if anybody else has any.
I'll let you take it away then.
Anybody here that, yeah, do you have a question? Do you want to use the mic? There's just a mic on that side. And we know it's going to be an NDP leading question. It's going to be great. And you can just say your name and welcome to CSI. Hi.
I'm a resident of Spadina-Fort York.
Yeah, welcome.
So my question, believe it or not, is actually for you, Tanya.
Oh, geez.
So
I'm not running.
Plot twist.
No, but it's actually relevant to the election. So just hear me out. I'm so glad you mentioned Kate Raworth. I'm sure you know of Mariana Mazzucato as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't overstate how incredible these women are. I mean,
Phenomenal.
They just leave Marx, David Ricardo, Adam Smith in the dust.
Cannot agree more.
And they don't get even 1% of the recognition that they deserve. But Mariana Mazzucato is working with the BC NDP government, so just shout out to BC NDP.
Good.
So my question to you is, you can't look at the present in a vacuum of history, which is what we do. Even today, I'm hearing an equivalency between the Liberal Party and the NDP. There's no equivalency, right? We're social democrats, right? We live in a feudalistic society in this country. 87 families have the same wealth of 12 million people. The Liberal Party is the defensive wing of the billionaire class. There's a political corporate nexus in this country. When they retire from politics, they join corporate boards.
Is this
right?
a question?
So my question is, so the economic system that you're talking about, oversupply, various other issues, how are we going to expect that from one of the mainstream parties? I mean, I just feel only social democrats can, because that's in our lifeblood, right?
Social Democrats?
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, thank you for calling out two incredibly important things. First of all, Maria Mazzucato, one of the most important thinkers of our time, like truly, and Kate Raworth, am I pronouncing
That's right.
that?
She's the author of Donut
Economics.
Economics. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add a couple more in there just to mess with y'all and give you a little reading list. Suzanne Simard, she wrote a book called Finding the Mother Tree. It will change your entire world vision. You can look at, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer, one of the most important thinkers and contributors of our time. So you just named two women who are profoundly questioning our economic system, and they are part of a global movement. There's a number of intersecting movements that are alive and well that we're not here. You're right. We're not hearing dick shit about in this election. Sorry, but it's true. I could do a whole thing on economic policy. But it's this question about, one of the movements is conscious capitalism. There's another movement called the well-being economy. That one's getting some real motion. We've got, on the magazines, the little colliders that I have on, please take them. They're old. They're completely going to go in the garbage if you don't read them because they're like 3-4 years old now. But it's all around participatory democracy. It's about inclusive economics. It's about understanding shareholder ownership. I think that what's happening is actually government's way behind. I don't think that forgive me, maybe the Greens, in my analysis, are, starting to look at structural change. I often describe the Greens as the innovation wing of the Liberals. I'm sorry I'm saying that, but that's what I think. And what's interesting is business is leading. And what we haven't heard about the $100 million. It's rare that I'm going to promote the work of Mars. I'm just saying that, but I am. they're doing amazing, amazing stuff. Our climate ventures work, Shay was here earlier. We've seen just in I think it's like 180 enterprises that have come out of CSI that are climate solutions and have now got follow-on funding of $100 million in under 3 years. What we're seeing is actually business is leading. And I think the real question, and this is not an economic debate, so I didn't give you the doozies, but the real question is what does our economic policy need to be in order to actually incentivize the right kind of business? And I think I think business is going there no matter which way. And I think we did see some exciting stuff in the last Liberal government when they were doing work around the Circular Economy Act, around looking at full cost production, what happens with our cell phones when they go bad, who's responsible to make sure that they don't all just go into the garbage. I think it's nascent, it's so early, it's so challenging, and I don't disagree with your next comment too, which is to say it's not enough.
Unless you end that nexus, right? The corporate political nexus, you have to shut down that revolving door. That's just what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I mean, we can let our respondents respond, because I mean, first of all, that was really fun for me, thank you. It's like, I really enjoy. Oh, I love that too. It's one of my favorites. But it really is this disconnect. I think you're really right to call out the disconnect between what's happening at a macroeconomic level on our planet with extraordinary investment into climate. And you all mentioned green economy, climate economy. I just have to say the just economy, the well-being economy, the caring economy. Think about it. If all of the childcare programs were actually cooperatives, what would happen if we were actually building a situation where private gain was the exception and community benefit and community ownership was the foundation, the grounds on that? Anyway, that is not the topic you bring up at exactly 6:30 when you promise to get everybody out of here. So I will let you, if you want to, because this fine gentleman, I forget your name already, Emile, opened up a can of worms. Go ahead. Who wants to go first?
I feel like I need to say a thing.
Okay, go. Good. You can say it.
Which is this. All the parties have challenges and problems. All the parties are the products of the political culture in which we exist. I find it interesting that you're going to make the critique about liberals being this. I'm not that. I come from community. I come from this community. I grew up at Spadina-Fort York Community Center. My parents were working class. My parents worked their butts off through the social investments and the programs funded by liberal governments. I am here because of those social supports, and I am proud to be doing this. I'm not a landlord. I don't have big assets. My husband's a janitor. We are working class. I have had to take a pay cut to do this, and I am proud to do this. I am supported by a community of many strong women, people of color, to show up for Spadina-Fort York. I'm going to fight for this community because I believe so fundamentally in it. So here's the invitation for all of us. All the parties need to look at our cultures, and I am doing this in my daily work. I am very proud to be asking the questions, how do we make our political cultures better for families, for working parents, for women? These are the questions every party needs to be looking at. I want to see us tackle the long, ongoing dynasties that exist in our political culture. I don't come from that. My parents are not politicians. I came up through public school systems. That is the public investment we need. That is the party that I'm defending. We build great things in this country. Liberals get things done.
Woo! Yeah. Okay, who wants to follow that? That did not answer the question at all, but carry on, Cara. Cara, do you want to go? You've got the Greens, or Chris, do you want to go? Yeah.
Okay. You know, I don't know the other candidates. We've just met a couple times. We do have some mutual friends, and I respect everybody who runs for office. It's a very challenging thing to do. The reason I am here is because the Liberals don't follow up on the promises. They run on an NDP platform, and then they govern with conservative policies. I am here because I was fighting for public education, not just because it's for our children, but because it's the foundation of our democracy. In order to have, in the 1800s, when people were fighting for public education, they realized that if you're going to have a democracy, you have to have an educated public. And that's what motivated me to fight for the last 25 years for public education. You know, and when the Liberals got in 2003, the cuts didn't stop. And the worst part was they largely privatized our public colleges and universities, which drove me crazy. They used to be 85% funded through public tax dollars. Now it's less than 50%. In fact, the Liberals changed the name of our public colleges and universities to publicly assisted colleges and universities. And when you think about it from a social innovation perspective, our public colleges and universities, their innovation centers, their research work, that is what is driving our tech sector in this province. We have one of the fastest growing tech sectors in the world because of the work that's done and the business partnerships that are developed with our public colleges and universities. The other one that I'll just mention, and it drives me crazy more than anything else, well, a couple of things. 2003, when the McGuinty Liberals were elected, you know, they never mentioned it, but the first thing they did was they privatized eye exams. This is still a contentious issue. In 2014, when the Nguyen Liberals were elected, and Del Duca was a cabinet minister in that government, they never mentioned in the election platform they were going to do this, but they sold Hydro One. And now, you know, instead of, we had created, you know, we had created Ontario Hydro in the early 1900s to make sure that we would get hydro at cost, both because it's good for residents, but it also gives us a competitive advantage. Now our electricity rates are a competitive disadvantage. The Liberals sold Ontario Hydro One for $9 billion. We, as taxpayers, are now subsidizing electricity rates at $6.1 billion a year. So our tax dollars are actually going to pay for a for-profit utility company, which is absolutely shameful. So when you look at public ownership, when you look at, you know, social innovation, we need a strong progressive government. And gee, with all due respect, the Liberals have not, their track record is not there. And that's why I'm here.
We're going to let Cara actually answer the question.
Yeah. So, I mean, right? If you want change, you have to vote for it. This is what I'm here for. I completely agree with you.
Closing arguments for all three, right? Yeah.
No, but it's true, right? When I meet people at the door, they tell me they're frustrated. I'm frustrated. This is why I'm running. I want to see change on climate. I want to see a caring society, like you mentioned. The Green Party of Ontario actually wants to make mental health free. We want to make sure that everybody can have access to it by not having to spend a lot of money when you need the care that you need. That's part of our platform. We really believe in creating a caring society where we put climate action in place, right? Conservatives, the Liberals, the NDP, they've all been taking turns in power and nothing has happened on climate change. You're not seeing the caring society that you want. If you want the change, vote for a change. I'm asking for your vote. Vote for me and the Green Party of Ontario, and we will see that progressive change.
I just love all of you. I just think you're all fantastic, and I love the way that you wrapped up the debate perfectly by each being able to make your pitch passionately. And as I said in the climate change debate, I'm simply blown away by the courage that it takes to stand up, and I see that each of you care deeply. I can actually just feel it in your energy, and you each have people that are here with you, and I feel them too. And I thank you and I thank them for supporting you to do this work and to be able to engage in a really high caliber conversation. I hope that you will all agree. Can we just say, pretty good, eh? Like pretty amazing? Yeah. Yeah. Like, you know, I know that the elections are always difficult, that some of us have parties that we feel aligned with, and others of us really are looking and trying to sort through and figure out what we should do, how we should do it. And you know, it is but one piece of democracy is the vote. But the real democracy is how you engage in community solutions each and every day. And so I invite each of you to play your civic duty to get involved in creating the solutions, the communities, the collaborations, the coalitions, the activities that will enrich your own personal life and your family and the community and Ontario at large, because ultimately Ontario is ours, it is yours. If you love this place, get involved, take a stand, step up, and bring the love. And just in the same way that these incredible humans have brought respect and love and caring to you and to each other, I just want to thank you tremendously. And to all of the online folks, and before we do the final clap, I just have to say, my team rocks over there. Can we just say yo, yo, hello? Elvira's been putting together the agenda like in 2 weeks' notice. Danielle has figured out how to do this whole space and get you guys all into the room. I don't even know Dave, but he must be awesome. And then the extraordinary maestro of all of the AV, looking down, hates to getting any credit, but that is Emil, and he is killing it, man. This guy is great. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you so much for your leadership. And everybody get out and vote. Thank you.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, make sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss out on any of our content. And if you'd like more of us, make sure to visit our website or follow us on our social media platforms.